I'd like to introduce you now to Majella Kelleher, who is the head of the Energy Demand Management team at SEAI, Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland, and is responsible for a wide range of programmes in the public and the private sector from SEAI. So I know from the cross-section of faces that I can see that we have both halves, private and public, here in the audience, and I look forward to hearing from you, Majella.
Thanks, Conor. Sorry, going the right direction would help for a start. Morning, everybody. I think actually there have been two really great expositions of kind of ISO 50000 in practice and the advantages that come with it. What I'm going to do this morning is take, I suppose, a quick trip more through kind of some what I kind of see as kind of supports, opportunities and obligations, and to try and just inform across, I suppose, areas where ISO 50001 fits in. So looking a little bit at our supports, energy agreements, energy efficient design standard, which Dermot has already touched on, to talk a little bit about that. Energy efficiency directive, both Article 7 on the obligation scheme and Article 8 on the energy auditing, which I know is close to everybody's heart in the room, and then some other opportunities. I think I'm not going to dwell on this one because I'm guessing that most people in the room are very well aware of our supports, but we do have a very wide range of supports, and from the very small companies to the very large, who are agreements in our large industry energy network. And I think it's one to be aware of, whether it's for yourselves in terms of either joining one of the programmes and getting the supports that go with it, but also whether it's your clients, if you're consultants, or your suppliers, some small small suppliers into you. So we work with everybody, from no matter what the size of the energy bill, right up to the largest energy users in the country. So it's just one to really be very aware of, not only for yourselves, but maybe for your supply chain and for your clients. I suppose the largest of those is the Large Industry Energy Network, 166, the largest energy users in the country, spending 1.1 billion on energy. 17% of totally primary energy requirements, so very big cohort to get at. Consistent performance saving of 27% for those that have been there since the beginning. 770 gigawatts in our 2013 report, 32 million savings. I suppose one of the things here, and that's really the historical performance, I think the key one is that the people in agreements, about half of the companies in our large industry energy network are in agreements, which means a commitment to implement 50001. And even though being in the large industry energy network means that you're a large company focusing on energy, but people who actually implement the energy management system have consistently outperformed the other half, and do year on year. And there's a continuous improvement year on year. So it's just in terms of where the benefits are for that one. That's just a skip through. If there's anybody in the room that I'm missing, send me the logo. I suppose on standards development, and Conor had mentioned it earlier, that in Ireland we really are leading here, kind of going back to the development of IS 393. There's a little bit of the history along there from 1995, where we started with the large industry energy network, and then looking at saying, we need to maybe implement this in a structured way, leading to a standard. And I suppose if we look at how far that has come, the areas for programme development for 2015 are focusing on particularly on the new standard on energy efficient design. So that's the one that I'm just going to talk a little bit about today. I suppose we had developed and worked with a number of people in our agreements programme in terms of developing an energy efficient design methodology, and the benefits out of that were so significant that we kind of felt really we should develop this into, I suppose it's the next phase of standards, in terms of starting with 399, going back to the early days of 393. So these were the companies that we had actually worked with on the saving in terms of energy efficient design. The process in developing it with them, the savings were very significant. So then we started working through, you can see some of them there, Astellas, and some of these actual case studies are on the stand outside if you want to pick them up. I suppose Astellas, we've there just on a blister packaging line right up to Diageo, which I think probably everybody has heard about it being the most energy efficient brewery in the world at this stage. But the savings that and their starting point would have been to be best in class, and particularly on the energy efficiency side. And in applying the design standard, they still achieved an additional 2.5 million savings on energy annually, and saved about another million, as I understand it, on water annually. So that's significant avoided energy, and it was really on the standard, and they would say that it really challenged just the process challenges. So as I say, it's the next phase of standards. So the standard is there. It was formalised in August 2014. It was launched by Minister White and Minister Nash in December, and there has been a lot of interest in it. I suppose one of the things that's different in it is that it's designed for energy performance, but also designed for energy management. And I think probably a lot of people in the room would have experience of having a beautifully designed building and systems and everything, and then you go in to actually operate it, and it's quite a different story in terms of getting it. So this really takes a cradle-to-grave approach. In terms of the business case for it, the typical energy savings in terms of avoided are 20 to 30%. I've mentioned it's designed for energy performance and designed for energy management. I suppose in the design process, it has new organisational responsibilities which put that, I suppose, challenge into the process and do it in specific responsibilities, which I'll show in a minute. And then the processes are structured throughout the full lifetime of the project. It's relevant to all stakeholders. It's something that you can apply to, for example, we're working in the National Paediatric Hospital, which is the biggest build and state investment, are applying 399 and working with us, down to a process line in a factory. So you can apply it at any size, any sector, any organisation, any project. I suppose this one for me in the standard is the one that I suppose speaks to me, to be honest, where you actually have the two responsibilities, where you're looking at the energy efficiency expert and the energy efficiency owner. And they have a different reporting line into, I suppose, the senior management or the investor, effectively, and also then in terms of challenging, whether it's on the M&E, on the design bit, and just means that it's an iterative process, but that there is that separation. I suppose we all know, working when it's a project moving, the pressures that come for delivery, and separating the energy of these two roles, I think limits the amount of I suppose maybe poor decisions that can be made just for expediency. The next one, and I suppose the Minister had talked about projects earlier, and this is one where I suppose we're working with both public and private sector in terms of the whole area of paying for energy performance. So energy performance contracting, or even just energy performance related payment. So we have developed in SEAI and worked with, I suppose, all of the organs of the state, between the State Solicitor's Office, the Government Construction Contracts Committee. It's in looking at developing a process for energy performance contracting that can work for the public sector. It has the framework around, I suppose, it's looking at energy service companies, looking at how we can look at market development on that side. There's a number of SEAI supports, which we'll talk about in a minute. There's handbooks and guides and structured approach, and all of that is on the website. And I think, for the public sector people in the room, they know they have to go through all of it. But for the private sector people, there's still a lot of information in there. It's a good way to do things. It's a little bit like ISO 50001 in coming at it in a structured way. And there's also, even if it's for energy performance contracts, there's standard contracts there, standard clauses and stuff that you can pick. So I'd encourage you to just familiarise yourself or be aware of that. And then clearly there's the financing end. So there's the Energy Efficiency Fund, and I suppose a lot of the pillar banks now developing energy efficiency offerings. I suppose the bottom line, when we look at it, the key consideration is a financially viable project. And one of the things that we have is a structured approach to saying, developing the business case, And then you're looking at your capital, your risks, how many of those you want to transfer, how much it's going to cost you to transfer, and then where your savings and how they pay for that. We had started off, to be honest, in the beginning and looking at it as energy performance contracting, and it became very kind of complex because the starting point, we were starting at the end rather than the beginning, and we've kind of revised that to more look at, I suppose it's a project development process, and it's really just a logical way of working through building up your business case. But building up information, I suppose particularly when you're talking energy performance contracting, baselines and data are so critical to how you can make judgments and how you're not going to have to pay for uncertainty, that at least it's about building up that information and then making your decision along the way as to what is the best way to deliver a project. We would advocate you shouldn't be delivering it in the traditional way anymore. I would be stitching suppliers into performance and paying for performance, however much you retain for that, but it is looking for that performance, I think, is critical. So that's our kind of process on that. We do have financial supports for people wanting to go down that route. So there are grants for, I suppose, the transaction costs. So at the early stage, you can get, depending on size of the energy bill, 50% of the cost up to 15,000 to work through the business case. And then if you're doing the kind of going through full energy performance contracting, again, there's 75% of the costs up to 37,500. It does mean you need to follow the process. It needs to be structured. And in fact, if anybody has queries on it, I see Cian O'Riordan from Powertherm here sitting at the top table, who has worked with us in developing a lot of the structures on that. So, but there are, so there are supports there, and so it's one to be aware of. Now, they're not for capital; they're actually for transaction. Energy Efficiency Directive. So they're all the opportunities. Now let's talk about the obligations. I suppose there's, in fact, there's the two articles on the Energy Efficiency Directive that I think are important for this room. I suppose the first is an opportunity for a lot of people in the room, and it's the Energy Efficiency Obligation Scheme. So this is Article 7, puts an obligation on energy suppliers to deliver energy savings on an annual basis on the basis of targets that are set and that they have to report, and it's us that they report into on it. I suppose the savings are, they're worked on as credits, and they're for suppliers. They're based on market sales. The energy suppliers are not, and I noticed a few of them here today, so they're looking for opportunities. They're not limited to achieving the savings within their own customers. So I think that's an important one when people are looking at the opportunity. And I think suppliers are looking for projects. They have this to deliver, and there's an opportunity in terms of either achieving funds, support, getting project management or M&V services. So just who's obligated and what level? Like the overall obligation target is 550 gigawatts, and it's allocated between energy suppliers who have market sales in excess of 600 gigawatts, and it's based on a previous year. They have some subsectoral targets, so it's split 70, I suppose maybe if we start at, there's a 5% in the fuel poor area, 20% in the residential, and then the balance to be got in non-residential or commercial. So from, I suppose, looking and working with energy suppliers, I think from an organisation's perspective, it's looking about what do you want if you're doing a project, if they can bring something to the table, and then it's what do you want in lieu of the credits that might be coming from it. I think the typical services, as I've said, are monitoring and verification, project management, metering, financial supports, but there's a whole range, and I think a lot of the participating energy suppliers are working to build up those partnerships and in terms of getting credits. I think the only caveat, and one to be just aware of, is that from the EU directive side, the supplier's involvement has to be demonstrably material to the delivery of the project. So at some level, something has to have happened that wouldn't have happened without the involvement in terms of attaching to credits. The next one then is the Energy Efficiency Directive, and it's been mentioned a couple of times this morning in terms of Article 8. So we have the Energy Audit Scheme. So the obligation is that non-SMEs must have an audit in place by completed. First compliance date is the 5th of December this year. If you have 250 employees or more, or if you have an annual turnover of 50 million and a balance sheet of 43, the obligation, whether you're a public or private organisation, falls to you. The obligation rests, the way that we're approaching it in Ireland is it rests with a legal entity in Ireland, and that's how you determine, in terms of, if there's a number of separate legal entities, it's the legal entity that the obligation falls on. I suppose the reality is it's going to be a light touch in 2015 in terms of, just capacity to do it. The derogations is if you're in ETS, you have a derogation for the energy that's covered by that licence. If you have 50,001 and it covers, you have to have the audit, it has to meet the requirements of, there's a definition of the audit in Annex 7, I think it is, of the directive. We have all of that stuff on our, beginning to build it up on our website. So the audit has to meet those requirements, but if you are certified to 50,001 and it covers 70% of your energy use, again, that meets the requirement. The 70% has to be your total energy use, so it has to cover 70% of your total, so electricity, heat and transport. If you are en route to 50,001, like we had a session yesterday where I think it's interesting, if you were at, and probably, Ronan, you might know this, I'd say the first 50,001 conference, I'd say there probably wasn't a public sector organisation in sight, whereas there are at least 4, and a few in the room, who are now certified to 50,001. And we had a session yesterday where we're looking at working with up to 20 public sector organisations in the top 20 to go towards 50,001. So I think that's recognition of what it can deliver. But if you have started working either with us under one of our agreements programmes, either public or private sector, and have your full energy review, kind of gap analysis and all of that done by December, and are certified by June of 2016, then that also meets compliance. A lot of people have asked about 14,001, and to be honest, it's within the directive and within the SI, it does mention 14,001. I suppose it depends how 14,001 is implemented in a particular organisation. At the end of the day, the audit still needs to meet the requirements of the structure that's in Annex 8, and will need to cover the, at least the 70%. So it's kind of unclear, but it's the minimum requirement, and it's making the judgment on that, and part of that judgment will be made by the registered energy auditor. So to move on to the registered energy auditors, SEAI. So we're obliged under SI 426 to establish a register and to register energy auditors under the energy audit scheme as qualified to carry out the energy audits under the regulations. We're very close. I'm hoping to have I suppose the guidance on the companies is actually already up on the website, and hoping to have the auditor stuff up on the website over the next couple of days. We're just finalising it and doing some work with the department on it. But I suppose the guiding principles being adopted, at the end of the day, the challenge and the kind of the bouncing around that we've had to continue, it's getting an appropriate balance between market access, so that it's not in terms of market access, and then also the credibility of a register of energy auditors. So we need to have enough on it, but it needs to be credible. So it's getting that balance right. So the approach at the moment, and I suppose having some kind of an independent objective assessment, that in a sense it can't be me at a desk making a judgment on an energy auditor's CV and whether the competencies are there or not. So I suppose the approach is going to be a minimum qualification level, relevant technical discipline, level 7, relevant kind of postgraduate experience of 7 years, and then have an additional, what we're calling kind of title or registration, which will either be that there's a robust independent assessment, say, for example, like the Energy Institute, or an energy experience competence with an exam and, say, the Association of Energy Engineers on that one with Certified Energy Manager. So they're the kind of ones that we're looking at in terms of finalising. So it'll be a 3-layer, which is the technical qualification is there, experience, but then there's some independent other measure of competence that we can layer over on that. I think on the register, it will be established by June. It's, you know, it's a challenge just to get there, but it will be, I kind of have by and in June, so you'll have to forgive me if it's the 30th, but it will be there. The application process we will have out before the end of the month. That will be fairly standard. It'll be kind of application form, normal tax and insurance certificates, degree certificates, adherence to a code of practice. I suppose the other things that are worth saying is that we will have strong guidance for enterprises. I mean, the reality is, in terms of establishing a register at this point, and it might change over time, but it's, you know, not all auditors on it will be appropriate for all jobs. And some will be more appropriate to buildings, some will be more appropriate to industry. So there will be strong guidance for industry, and it'll be a caveat emptor. Having said that, it's non-SMEs, so in my view they're big companies, big boys, you know, in terms of procuring the services, but there will be a list to procure them from. The other one, and I think it's a question a lot of companies have asked, is can internal people do the audit? And yes, they can, but they will need to be registered on the register and meet the requirements to be on the register. Also, there'll be kind of 2 senior signatories required on that in terms of compliance, just to ensure that it's being met. I suppose the other opportunities are Sustainable Energy Awards. We are opening for submissions, applications this week. I think Friday, doing that today. I think at the end of the day, we've talked a lot about excellence and ISO 50001, and would really encourage you to look at it and to submit. And equally, there's a lot of winners, previous winners, and shortlisted people in the room. So we are open. They're really they're about, I suppose, encouraging, recognising and rewarding excellence. They publicly acknowledging achievement. And I think Dermot was saying it earlier, you know, on the energy efficient design and his engineers, in terms of how powerful that can be, just to get people to be saying, you know, that was me, and kind of blowing the trumpet. And I think it is, they have been, and I think for people who do get involved in them, they can be quite powerful. I suppose it's really about highlighting and showcasing the benefits of energy management and promoting widespread use. That's the kind of list of categories. This year we have 2 title sponsors, being Electric Ireland and Enprova, and Glendimplex are also sponsoring an innovation award. So we're kind of broadening it out and look forward to lots of submissions. So the online application form will be open. We've gone to an online approach this year, so hopefully make it a little bit simpler, and closing date will be the 26th of June. I think the final one, and again, I don't want to presume everybody in the room knows about it, but if you don't, accelerated capital allowances for energy technologies. I think because the EEE register and because public sector have to purchase off this register, it's now growing significantly. Now, it is a tax incentive, not a grant, and it's, you know, 100% write-off in the first year. But we now have kind of 12,200 products on that, with 52 technologies under 10 categories. I think if you're a supplier, you should be on it, and it's looking to get on it. Public sector have to purchase from it, and I think that's what's really driven it. And it's been, you know, so it's been really growing substantially over the last couple of years. And I suppose not only with the tax incentive, but you're getting your energy savings as well. Clearly, you must be a company and paying corporation tax to gain of it. I actually think that's my last slide. I'm after galloping through it, but we're going to have a very long coffee now. So, thank you very much. There's the details to get in contact.